Hi, welcome back to Beyond Pavement. I am your host, Jeff Kleinert, and thank you so much for making us the #1 off-road podcast on iTunes. So keep telling your friends, and who knows, maybe we can dominate NPR at some point. Anyway, today we are going to be finishing up the install, at least of the front half of this Fabtech Lift Kit onto our Dodge Ram pickup truck, and we're going to be doing it with the help of our friends over at ORU in Burbank, California. Now, before you get started on this episode, remember to remove the bump stop underneath your truck next to the A-arm. We mentioned in the last episode, but you just want to make sure that you get that done before you get started today. But now you're ready to start. Take some notes, sit back and enjoy.
Hello, Farmers Help Point. How can I help you?
Hi, listen, I just got rear-ended by some yahoo.
Are you okay?
Well, I'm fine. My car's a little busted up, though.
No problem. We'll take care of it.
How fast can Farmers Help Point service get your car fixed after an accident? Well, you get the idea. Help Point is free with your policy.
Step 12, install rear cross member. Simply bolt it in using the lower control arm pockets and the factory hardware that you already had. Step 13, install front cross member. Just like you did with the rear cross member, just bolt it in using the lower control arm pockets and the factory hardware. Step 14, drill bump stop. Go back to the bump stop mountings that we were at earlier with those rubber bump stops and drill out the factory hole to a 1/2 inch so we can install the new bump stop drop mounts. After drilling out your bump stop and when you're installing your drop mount, you're going to be using the 1/2 inch bolt that they provide. You're also going to be using the washer and the lock washer that they provide. When you're screwing it in, make sure to put a little bit of Loctite on the bolt before you screw it. Now just shove the bump stop back in. Good to go. Step 15, install lower control arm. You're going to be installing the factory control arm to the Fabtech cross members that we've already installed. When you're installing the control arm, you're going to be using all new hardware, all new bolts, washers, and nuts. And use Loctite on all bolts. Step 16. Prep coil spring for install. Grab the factory provided isolator and the Fabtech provided isolator and secure them onto the top of the coil spring using either zip ties or electrical tape. Step 17. Install your coil spring. Place it into your lower control arm and make sure it's properly mounted and properly placed in there, and then compress it using a floor jack. Be very careful. This is a really dangerous part of the entire install because the compressed spring can be very dangerous if it gets loose or dislodged. And then after you're done with that, we're going to install the spindle. Step 18, install spindle. You'll be installing the new Fabtech spindle using the upper and lower ball joints, and you'll be using the factory lock nuts with a little bit of Loctite. So install that, tighten it up, and once this is secure, go ahead and release tension by letting the floor jack down a little bit. Step 19, reinstall hub. You're going to be reinstalling the factory hub onto your new spindle using the factory bolts and also a little bit of Loctite. If you have an ABS system, you want the sensor to be mounted right here, and then run the wires back up to behind the firewall. Step 20, reinstall the rotor and the caliper. Reinstall the factory rotor and the factory caliper using the factory hardware and a lot of Loctite. Once you put it back on, check the rotation. Make sure that the brake line doesn't go too tight, and if it does, adjust it by gently moving the metal tubing at the end of the brake line. Once that's all set, go ahead and move on to the next step. Step 21, reinstall tie rod. Take your original tie rod, put it in the spindle, and then reattach the lock nut. And make sure to use a little bit of Loctite when you do it. Step 22, install shock. We're going to be installing the Fabtech Performance shock using factory hardware on the bottom and supplied hardware on top. And we're going to be using Loctite on all the bolts. Repeat step 14 through 22 on the opposite side. And after you do that, tighten up the bolts on the cross members and on the lower control arms. Step 23. Install sway bar bracket. Find the hole for the original factory sway bar. Use that as a guider to be able to line up the new bracket that you're going to be installing. Then drill a 5/16 hole down at the bottom by using the new bracket as a template. After you drill that hole, use the Fabtech bolts that it comes with down here at the bottom and at the top, and also the Fabtech washers. Use a little bit of Loctite, attach the bracket, and you're ready to install your sway bar. Step 24, install the sway bar. Remove the sway bar, flip it over, and then reinstall it using the factory hardware and a little bit of Loctite. Then reinstall the factory end links and attach those to the new Fabtech bracket. Once again, on all the bolts, use Loctite. So once you do that on this side, do the same thing on that side, and you'll be ready to move on. Now we are done installing the front portion of this Fabtech Lift Kit on your beautiful Dodge Ram truck. So tune in to the next episode so we can continue on and finish the back half, because you can't have a full set until you have both. That sounded weird.